Good morning. A couple announcements. uh, I was thinking about how we have these projections about teachers. At least I have projections about teachers of a certain invulnerability, which is sort of weird. I don't know why we would think that, but or anyone why I would think that. I won't accuse you all of having the same projections I have. In any case, I am vulnerable, and I will probably be here on Friday, but I will, like if I am, I will have a large bandage on my forehead. So I'm having some flesh cut out tomorrow. You know, all things are impermanent. It is the nature of our body to deteriorate. My friend Greg, my teaching partner, because I've kept saying that when we talk, there's the 5 daily contemplations in Buddhism that are of the nature to age, to sicken, and to die, and to be separated from everything and everyone that I hold dear. And then the 5th daily contemplation is about karma. I'm whatever karma I do, that I shall inherit. But I keep saying, well, I feel like they've missed something in around aging and sickness that I call deterioration. So Greg says I've created a 6th contemplation. I am of the nature to deteriorate, because somehow I'm not always sick, but like my body's just falling apart in general, So, but hopefully, the drugs will have worn off and I'll be able to speak. And if not, I don't know. Anne, how are you feeling? You getting me around on Friday night? All right, maybe. Okay, thank you. We'll see. I'm sort of hopeful. So besides that, it's nice to be back in my home spot. Those who follow me know that if they see that little painting back there of the Buddha on the bicycle, that I am in Berkeley. Wow, Buddha on a bicycle in Berkeley. We've got regular alliteration going on here. And I have been away for a couple of weeks, went to Southern Dharma Retreat Center. I did check in with you guys that first Tuesday there 2 weeks ago. And then I was I was there for a week. We had a really great retreat, and actually one of the retreatants is here. Michelle, hi, nice to see you. I think she's the only one who's here, was on the retreat. It's a really special place. If you ever get an opportunity to go there, it's out in the western North Carolina, in the mountains, the Smokies or the Blue Ridge or something. I can't figure out which it is, sort of both maybe. And there's only room for 25 retreatants, so it's very intimate. And it's a very like a rustic, beautifully wooden buildings, and in this hollow in the hills. Just it's a really great place to practice. And so after that, I headed up to DC to hang out with my daughter, and then we went to New York and saw our favorite baseball team at our favorite baseball stadium, which shall remain nameless, so as not to offend fans of other teams. Although you guys kind of know. Anyway, it's been, I don't love traveling, but then there are certain things that happen when you're traveling that don't happen anywhere else. So I kind of like to do it. Like I get to teach other people and I get to see other people. Anyway, so we will meditate for about 20 minutes, as we do. This class is just an hour, and I've kept it. I started it as something short when we started it back in March of 2020, to make it an easy thing to just try to drop in on and not feel like it's this project to get through. And that was both for you and for me, so that I could sustain it. So we have sustained it for 2.5 years, which is pretty remarkable. And I appreciate people showing up and being part of it. But we meditate for 20 minutes, and then I'll talk for a little while. And then if there's some time left, I'll open it up. So simple. So let's get into a comfortable meditation posture. And just again, for people who are new to this group, I usually kind of give instruction for about 10 minutes and then let it be silent for the second half of the sit. So just settling into a comfortable posture, however you are comfortable when meditating. And the good thing about Zoom is you can sit in any posture that works for you. So if you're sitting on a floor or in a chair, or you could even be lying down or standing up. And the Buddha teaches mindfulness in 4 postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. You can close your eyes, or if you're more comfortable having your eyes open, you can just lower your gaze. We want to really step out of the visual world, the screen world, into our inner experience, starting with just feeling your body. A phrase from the Satipatthana Sutta is to just be aware that there is a body. It's an interesting mantra. There is a body, and this is it. So feeling how you're holding your body, your posture, whether there's efforting or tension, or whether there's something, the other end of energy and a kind of slackness. We want to find a balance, which we're upright and alert, still relaxed. And releasing the shoulders, softening the belly, relaxing the jaw, just a sense of the whole body releasing. Feeling the breath moving in the body. And feeling the energetic quality of the living body, of the living organism. So with the eyes closed, can shift away from thinking of the body as a kind of a shape or a form. Feel it more as an energy, the flow of different sensations, different sense impressions through the hearing, noticing sounds in your environment. And where does your body feel most alive and awake? Where does it feel less so, where there's very little sensation? And tuning in then on another subtle level, the level of feeling, kind of background, emotion or mood. What are you holding or carrying this morning? Very often we don't really see or acknowledge the flow of emotion through a day. It can capture us and affect our whole perception. So to bring that into awareness helps us to maintain more equanimity, to just be open and accepting of what is here right now, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. We're letting go of the habit of trying to control how we feel, just learning to breathe with feeling. It's natural for the mind to wander, for thoughts to arise, and capture our attention. So integral to this process is noticing when our attention has been hijacked by thinking, to see that, to acknowledge that, come back to the body, to the breath. You might start to just make a mental note of the breathing, breathing in, breathing out, just as a way of really bringing forward an anchor, attention to the breath. You can feel the sensations at a particular point, like the nostrils or the belly. Or you can follow the whole movement of breath. In the suttas, the Buddha suggests we just notice the length of the breath. Is it long or short? Breathing in, I understand that I breathe in a long breath. Breathing out, I understand that I breathe out a long breath. Breathing in, I understand that I breathe in a short breath. Breathing out, I understand that I breathe out a short breath. So we need to find our own way of working with the breath. There isn't one correct way. Rather, we need to notice when we are able to get into a flow with the breath. And try to continue with that particular approach. Whatever approach we find most useful, really, we want to notice the effort behind it. Striving is one thing that will undermine any attempt at mindfulness. And yet we must make an effort. So to just notice the quality of effort. Is it an open, gentle guidance or a sense of striving and struggling to do it right? Another way to think of this is working with the breath as though we are receiving the experience rather than chasing after it. Just receiving the breath moment by moment. Nice to sit together, such as it is, such as the togetherness is. So, I had a couple of things maybe to talk about this morning. Probably still a little bit arriving. Traveling is so interesting. Talk a little bit about that, but just first to talk about the breath a little bit. Such a sort of simple thing, and those who have been coming here for a while know that I've been working a lot, studying and thinking about and writing about the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha's teaching on mindful breathing, and it's there's this feeling that I have that I've sort of missed something way back when. I started practicing in 1980, started doing Buddhist practice, mindfulness of the breath, and in reading Thich Nhat Hanh and Buddhadasa, who both have written books about the Anapanasati Sutta. The idea that you're really supposed to be mindful of breathing all the time, not just when you're meditating. Okay, I think I sort of knew that, but I think I don't think I ever adopted it as fully as I think it's being suggested. But even more basic, the question, because and I quoted the Buddha in the guided meditation today, that in both in the Anapanasati and in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the four foundations of mindfulness. Oh look, here's Reverend Freechild. In both those suttas, it starts out by the Buddha saying, be mindful of the breath. He doesn't say what that means, but then he immediately says, understand when the breath is long, and then understand when the breath is short. And then he goes on from there to, being aware of the body with the breath, and calming the body with the breath. And then the Anapanasati goes on with 12 other steps that all include, breathing in, you're aware of this, breathing out, you're aware of this. But the only actual guidance on what mindful breathing means is, he says, is being aware of the length of the breath, which has never been a way I've practiced, and I've never had any teacher suggest that as a way of practicing. The closest I think I've come is, like Ajahn Amaro sometimes says, to be aware of the rhythm of the breath, which is not the same as the length, but it sort of points at something similar. And so, as somebody who's been practicing for 42 years, I feel a bit at sea with that. Like, wait, what? Because I always was taught, be aware of the sensations of the breath, right? But then I'm going in, I feel I shouldn't even be saying some of these things because I'm just going to disturb people and confuse you. But, maybe good to be confused because it forces us to look for ourselves and to break away from our assumptions. Ajahn, or Bhikkhu Analayo, one of the other people who's written a book on this topic, and really probably today the preeminent scholar of the early Buddhism. He says that being aware of the sensations is not the first step, but that's actually being aware of feeling Vedana, which is, the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral quality of something. That I find really confusing. So anyway, I will share with you my latest experience with the breath. Then I'm going to move on. I'll get off the breath. I started being aware of the breath in reverse. I would reverse of how I've always thought of it. I've always thought of the breath as if I'm going to follow it, like normally I would just pay attention to the breath at the nostrils. But if I'm going to follow it, I would feel I'm breathing in my chest and then my belly. In the last few weeks, I started being aware of my belly first because I realized, and again, I feel really silly not realizing this, the breath actually starts with opening the ribs and the belly. And I don't know the science of breathing. And if somebody does, I would love to hear that. But, it's occurred to me for some time, for years, that it feels as if I'm sucking in the breath. I know this anyway, I'm constantly questioning that I'm talking about this, but thank you for sharing. Head, mind, let go. It feels as if I'm sucking in the breath, but that's not how it works. I believe that what we are doing is that by opening certain muscles, expanding certain muscles, we are creating a vacuum in the lungs. That's how vacuum cleaners work, right? You have to create a space, and then the air pressure brings the breath in. I'd love to hear someone who knew more about that. Eleanor agrees. Thank you, and I know you are an analytical person. So that means that the breath has to start with the expansion. It doesn't start here, like pulling it from my nose, but rather that my belly opens, my ribs expand. So now I've started feeling my breath from the bottom up. So I offer you that as an interesting way to follow the breath, to notice, oh yeah, my stomach, my chest. It's very quick, right? It's like, unless I breathe slowly, and then I can feel that it's the top of my lungs that are the last part that kind of fills. And then I start to let go, and it goes back in reverse. So just if you're looking for a way to be mindful of the breath, that's something you might play with. So moving on to maybe a more colorful topic, let's say. Just thinking about traveling, and I'm sure many of you have reflected on this, especially Buddhist practitioners, how traveling is this experience when it's like the day you are going somewhere. And there's a lot around it too, but the day you are going somewhere in which it becomes this kind of bardo, where you are in your mind is not where you're supposed to be. And where you are is just an interim point to get to where you're going. And it's all about just getting there. And, that's why people drink a lot when they're in airports, when they're on planes. You just immerse yourself. Oh, I can just binge some TV on the back of your plane seat. And it's just so interesting, that discomfort with just going somewhere. And then you think about all the time in your life that's spent. And it can actually be just the time walking across the room. It's like, I'm just trying to get somewhere. It's always like, it's not like, oh, this is where I am now and now and now and now. It's, there's the place I want to be, there's the place I am. Everything in between doesn't count. It's not important. It's just a vehicle for getting there, if you'll pardon the sort of double entendre there. So interesting, And I'm a great one for projecting out about the future. I'm sure many of you are. Planning. I can sit in my meditation posture and supposedly be meditating and really spend most of the time figuring out what I'm going to put in my suitcase for the place that I'm going next week, And so having some like health issues, as I am now, is a great way to kind of stop that for a moment. Because it's the realization that, oh, that's not real. And that, the plan about going to Ireland next year is like, no, that there's no, and of course there's never any promise, right? It's just the illusion, but that's what our minds do, and we talk about why, but so interesting to just be faced with, oh, maybe not. And I guess the first thing that strikes me about that is that the question of why the mind wants to, instead of being here meditating on my breath and having a pleasant experience as meditation can be, instead wanting to be somewhere else. And it is just like traveling, right? I mean, you're traveling in your mind, and even though you're not going anywhere, and maybe you don't know if you're going to go somewhere, you just go out, and so I guess to bring it back to recovery and addiction, it's really so much, being loaded. In some ways, the spiritual aspect of getting loaded, whether it's with alcohol or drugs or any activity, is to some extent about being present. I want, the only way I can really be here is if I kind of create this altered state that sort of captures my attention, captures my experience, or maybe even like cuts off my ability to think about the future. And so there's a craving in us for that, a hunger to be present. It's very interesting, right? This kind of dichotomy within us. The part of us that wants to be here and the part of us that doesn't want to be here. We don't want to be here for, I guess the way I think of it is we don't want to be here for reality. But we'd like to be here for something, something fun, something exciting, something stimulating, something pleasurable. If I can have something good, then I will be here. But if it's not going to be what I want it to be, then I would like to please depart from this place, from this moment, from this physical experience, from this mental experience. I want to create something different. And of course, now we've arrived back at that, point of dukkha. This is dukkha. This is it, Not okay the way it is, needing things to be different from the way they are. And the Buddha is so much insistent on being here, and not being somewhere else. And so much of the teaching, so much of the instruction especially, is about, various strategies for helping us to be here. So the 5 daily recollections are meant to remind us that all of your thoughts about the future are just thoughts, and that stuff might not happen. And so even though he doesn't say it explicitly, what we infer from that is that he meant like, stop it. You're of the nature to age, to sicken, and to die. Like, don't waste your time being out there thinking that you're going to do everything you're going to do next year. This is it, right here, right now. Be present. And then the mindfulness practices as well are very clear about that. To be aware of when you're walking forward, when you're walking backward, when you're reaching out, when you're touching something, when you're smelling something, when you're tasting something, be aware of all these things. So, but then he gives us, I would say, particularly in the Anapanasati, which immediately after the instruction on breath, immediately says, breathing in, I experience joy. Breathing out, I experience joy. Breathing in, I experience happiness. Breathing out, I experience happiness. So what I take from that is that Buddha says, here's some tools that if you train your mind to stay present, to stay in your body, to stay with your felt experience moment by moment, that there develops this joyfulness, this serenity, this experience that makes it worth not going somewhere. The thing that you were trying to get by being loaded or by being out in the future, you can have it in a, all natural, healthy way. You have to put in some work to make that happen. And it's not something you can turn on and turn off like a drug. It's going to be inconsistent because everything is impermanent, and so your capacity to hold the mind in the present moment will come and go. But this is what I'm offering you. I'm sort of trying to quote maybe what the Buddha thought. This is what I'm offering, is this potential to be fully alive, to be present, and for it to be joyful. So it's worth it. And then, that's not the end of the story. That's only the beginning of the story. It's laying the foundation for the potential for a complete transformation in our experience of our mind and body through letting go of craving, through letting go of craving for things to be different from the way they are, through letting go of clinging to I. And all that comes along with that. Letting go of clinging to the body, clinging to our relationships, everything. And that's where he tells us and he shows us that the real freedom and possibility, the ultimate, potential of this human experience lies. And it's what we're trying to cultivate in this very simple way that starts with just being aware of the breath. And, so we could think like there's this end point of nirvana or this, transformative insight. We can turn that into another trip, another bardo, where, I'm here and there's enlightenment and I'm not there, and until I'm there, everything's just annoying, but that really, really, is a corruption of what the Buddha is saying, because it's what we really are being challenged to do is live in a way that imitates the life of an enlightened being, so that each moment we try to remind ourselves, consciously, intentionally, be present, let go. Everything's impermanent. Let go of self. Let go of these relationships, the clinging to controlling relationships, or having things that you own or think of as own. Just that we can, so that we can, once we understand the Dharma on some significant level, even if we haven't had the transformation that makes it so there's this just letting go and there's a kind of freedom that comes with that, we can, as I say, imitate that and keep reminding ourselves. This is what Ayakema, a great German Buddhist nun, said, we should practice our insights. And this is why we meditate together. This is why we listen to the Dharma. And this is why we have daily reflections, why we have contemplations that we do, why we are encouraged to notice impermanence, to notice when there's clinging, to notice when there's suffering, to let go, to let go, to let go. It's not unreasonable to correlate our clinging our ordinary clinging, we could call it, the ordinary clinging of the unenlightened worldlings that we are, with the clinging of addiction. It's such a perfect correlation in so many ways. The addiction is tends to be a more immediate and destructive and obvious form of clinging. But when we start to examine moment by moment our own clinging, we see that it's the same thing, just on a spectrum, really. There is the ordinary clinging of daily life, and then there are more and more intense and destructive and ultimately deadly forms of clinging on the kind of outer edges of that spectrum, perhaps, if that image works for you. And this is why, when we get sober or clean, when we come into recovery, we don't, abandon all clinging. We realize, oh, well, I've let go of that really destructive area. But then if we're paying attention, particularly if we have any kind of a Buddhist sort of perspective, we see, oh, wait, there's these underlying other forms. And these can often manifest as other forms of addiction too, around food and sex and gambling and all sorts of, controlling people, grasping, shopping, working, the list goes on, right? But even if we kind of let go of those more pernicious forms of clinging, we start to see, and we get closer and closer to the kind of core clinging, which many people consider to be the clinging to self, the core addiction, self. And that's, what being addicted to self means is maybe not something I'm going to try to get into in the remaining few minutes we have. But, on some superficial or maybe just basic level, it's pretty obvious, and it's very much what the 12-step literature says, that, self-centeredness was the core of our problems, right? And then, as I like to quote the 12 traditions, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions. So anonymity, which is letting go of identity on some level, on a specific level, in the 12 steps, but in Buddhism, a much broader level. Yeah, we see that self is the underlying problem, and so simply to address the obvious ways that clinging to self harm us, like our craving for attention, our neediness, our grasping for status and to be seen. But it goes much deeper than that. But I think I will wrap that up for now and thank you for your kind attention, and just see that we have a little bit of time left. So if anyone wants to chime in with any thoughts or questions, I'd be happy to converse with you. Jim.
I just noticed I'm James on there today. I don't know how that works.
Identity keeps changing, it's
evidently it's all impermanent. My name's really Paul.
Cool.
I just wanted to say, Kevin, your talk today was particularly timely for me. I had an interesting experience this last week. I had a realization that when I'm meditating, I've gotten pretty good at dropping into the present and paying attention to what I'm seeing, physical sensations, what I'm hearing. But I realized that I'm not paying attention to how I feel. And when I start checking in with how do you feel right now, what I've discovered is I'm feeling happy and I'm feeling joy. And it's kind of there. But if I'm so busy paying attention to what I see and hear, I am not noticing it. And so all of a sudden, I've gotten used to the idea of checking in with how I feel. And I've discovered joy and happiness is there most of the time. I think it's pretty interesting that
Lovely,
I
yes.
have been doing this for so long and just stumbled on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I had.
Well, thanks, Jim. And really, connecting with how I feel is like core to my practice. Although usually it's not as pleasant as yours experience, so I'm jealous, but I'll let that go. No, but that's great, and I do think we sometimes teach meditation as though it were just about be aware of your breath, and or at least people often hear that, and there's really much more to the practice, and sort of tuning into these different subtle experiences is key to the larger project of letting go, because even as you tune into the pleasant feeling, not to become attached to that is key. So thank you. I'm glad that happened for you. Yeah. Julie, hello, nice to see you.
Good morning, Kevin. Good morning, Sangha. It's always wonderful to be here. Just along two lines. One is I always, or usually, identify my primary addiction as my addiction to my small egoic self and my delusion of control. That is my primary addiction and clinging. And my food addiction is just a very, very, very strong manifestation of that. But it is definitely clinging to my small egoic self. So I appreciated your bringing that in. And then in terms of the breath, in the last few months, I've incorporated a few different techniques, if you will, that I find very helpful. And I just never get bored in meditation. I haven't meditated, I guess, long enough to experience that whole boredom thing. But I find the breath endlessly fascinating. And so one of the things I'm learning is, or I was introduced to, is something called central channel breathing. And it's, you bring the energy and the breath up through the earth and you release it through this chakra, I forget what that's called, the crown, your crown.
Uh-huh.
And then you bring it back down and you're doing it through your spine. And you're you use Kegel, you use your pelvic floor to propel both the energy upward and downward. So I've been doing that in conjunction with what was introduced to me recently as 4-7-8 breathing, and I've done all kinds of box breathing.
Julie, it's a little much for because you're kind of like giving instruction that I don't want to just put out ideas to people. If you want to point people to a reference for that, for they can look into it, but I'm a little concerned that you're kind of like,
Thank you.
yeah, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not,
Thank you
I
for
don't,
reining. Thank
I
you
don't,
for reining me in.
I don't, yeah, you know, I don't want to cut you off, but I'm just
Thank you.
like, these are all really interesting and useful. If you have like a reference you could put in the chat, I think then people could like look into it for themselves.
Yes, I guess my end point is the breath is endlessly fascinating for me.
Yes, isn't it? Thank you. And it's so true. And yeah, thanks. Thanks for being understanding it. I know. I mean, I keep looking at it and being curious, and I can get really bored with it too. So, all right. Denise, hello.
Hello, it's good evening. Thank you very much, Kevin, and everybody else. I'm not sure about the breathing. I think I'll have to reflect on that separately. But you talked about your body. I'm the same about my body not being as it should. It was a long time ago, and I'm very conscious that age is catching up with me. And it brings me back to mindfulness. My late husband was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I remember we drove up the road from the hospital and stopped the car and in stunned silence. And he was a member of AA as well, and he said to me, "This puts one day at a time in context."
Yeah.
And we actually had 6 years before he did die, and that got us through the one day at a time and being in the present. And but it took that event for us. I mean, we'd both been recovering alcoholics for 30 odd years, and we knew intellectually about it, but it was that event that actually internalized it. You know what I mean? But you lose it, don't you? I mean, it's 6 years since he died, but obviously this week the Queen has died, and so the media and everything is grieving basically, and reflecting on the life of the Queen, and it's reminded me of that, that life is impermanent. Because I mean, I know she was 96, but I think the majority of the population here just thought she'd go on forever. And even though we knew she'd die, when she actually dies, it's a shock. And that is internalized, because she's always been there for people, for my generation, for every generation. And it really internalizes the just live in the moment and what's important, and you just brought it up there with your meditation. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, I know. I saw someone, on being interviewed in front of Buckingham Palace saying, "I was so shocked that she died." And I was like, "What? She was 96. How could you be shocked?" But I think, yes, of course, that's what we do. And that's why the Buddha emphasized impermanence, because we create this illusion. We need that illusion in order to function, right? Yeah. If we're constantly realizing like the floor could just collapse, underneath me, my body is falling apart, we wouldn't be able to function. But time also, and lifespans really help to support that. I just, sometimes I notice like a fruit fly flying around and think, okay, well that insect is going to live for about 24 hours. So after like 12, 14, 16 hours, it's like, man, I'm just going to be around forever, And man, I'm getting old and I've been alive for 20 hours. God, can you believe it? And what if, a fruit fly lives to be like 26 hours and everybody's like, wow, that's like the elder of the fruit flies. And you realize it's just a complete, like, in cosmic time or whatever, the time of the universe or geological time or all of these things is like, what? We're fruit flies. We're less than fruit flies. But it's all we got, so we cling to it. It's so. Yes, indeed. Well, my dear friends, it is past the top of the hour.